The Atomic Age, also known as the Atomic Era, is the period of history following the detonation of the first nuclear bomb, Trinity, on July 16, 1945, during World War II. Although nuclear chain reactions had been hypothesized in 1933 and the first artificial self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction had taken place in December 1942, the Trinity test and the ensuing bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan that ended World War II represented the first large-scale use of nuclear technology and ushered in profound changes in sociopolitical thinking and the course of technology development. Atomic power was seen to be the epitome of progress and modernity. In 1973, the United States Atomic Energy Commission predicted that, by the turn of the 21st century, 1,000 reactors would be producing electricity for homes and businesses across the USA. However, the nuclear dream fell far short of what was promised because nuclear technology produced a range of social problems, for the nuclear arms race to nuclear meltdowns, and the unresolved difficulties of bomb plant cleanup and civilian plant waste disposal and decommissioning. After 1973, reactor orders declined sharply as electricity demand fell and construction costs rose. Many orders and partially completed plants were cancelled. By the late 1970s, nuclear power had suffered a remarkable international destabilization, as it was faced with economic difficulties and widespread public opposition, coming to a head with the 3 Mile Island accident in 1979, and the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, both of which adversely affected the nuclear power industry for many decades. Early years. In 1901, Frederick Soddy and Ernest Rutherford discovered that radioactivity was part of the process by which atoms changed from one kind to another, involving the release of energy. Soddy wrote in popular magazines that radioactivity was a potentially inexhaustible source of energy, and offered a vision of an atomic future where it would be possible to transform a desert continent, thaw the frozen poles, and make the whole Earth one smiling Garden of Eden. Quote, "The promise of an atomic age, with nuclear energy as the global, utopian technology for the satisfaction of human needs, has been a recurring theme ever since." But Soddy also saw that atomic energy could possibly be used to create terrible new weapons. The concept of a nuclear chain reaction was hypothesized in 1933, shortly after Chadwick's discovery of the neutron. Only a few years later, in December 1938, nuclear fission was discovered by Otto Hahn and his assistant Fritz Strassmann, and proved with Hahn's radiochemical methods. The first artificial self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction took place in December 1942 under the leadership of Enrico Fermi. In 1945, the pocketbook The Atomic Age heralded the untapped atomic power in everyday objects and depicted a future where fossil fuels would go unused. One science writer, David Dietz, wrote that instead of filling the gas tank of your car 2 or 3 times a week, you will travel for a year on a pellet of atomic energy the size of a vitamin pill. Glenn T. Seaborg, who chaired the Atomic Energy Commission, wrote, "There will be nuclear-powered Earth-to-Moon shuttles, nuclear-powered artificial hearts, plutonium-heated swimming pools for scuba divers, and much more." World War II. The phrase "atomic age" was coined by William L. Lawrence, a New York Times journalist who became the official journalist for the Manhattan Project, which developed the first nuclear weapons. He witnessed both the Trinity test and the bombing of Nagasaki, and went on to write a series of articles extolling the virtues of the new weapon. His reporting before and after the bombings helped to spur public awareness of the potential of nuclear technology and in part motivated development of the technology in the US and in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union would go on to test its first nuclear weapon in 1949. In 1949, U.S. Atomic Energy Commission Chairman David Lilienthal stated that atomic energy is not simply a search for new energy, but more significantly a beginning of human history in which faith in knowledge can vitalize man's whole life. 1950s. The phrase gained popularity as a feeling of nuclear optimism emerged in the 1950s, in which it was believed that all power generators in the future would be atomic in nature. The atomic bomb would render all conventional explosives obsolete, and nuclear power plants would do the same for power sources such as coal and oil. There was a general feeling that everything would use a nuclear power source of some sort in a positive and productive way. From irradiating food to preserve it, to the development of nuclear medicine, there would be an age of peace and plenty in which atomic energy would provide the power needed to desalinate water for the thirsty, irrigate the deserts for the hungry, and fuel interstellar travel deep into outer space. This use would render the atomic age as significant a step in technological progress as the first smelting of bronze, of iron, or the commencement of the Industrial Revolution. This included event cars, leading Ford to display the Ford Nucleon concept car to the public in 1958. There was also the promise of golf balls which could always be found, a nuclear-powered aircraft, which the U.S. federal government even spent US $1.5 billion researching. Nuclear policy making became almost a collective technocratic fantasy, or at least was driven by fantasy. The very idea of splitting the atom had an almost magical grip on the imaginations of inventors and policy makers. As soon as someone said, in an even mildly credible way, that these things could be done, then people quickly convinced themselves that they would be done. In the USA, military planners believed that demonstrating the civilian applications of the atom would also affirm the American system of private enterprise, showcase the expertise of scientists, increase personal living standards, and defend the democratic lifestyle against communism. Some media reports predicted that, thanks to the giant nuclear power stations of the near future, electricity would soon become much cheaper, and that electricity meters would be removed, because power would be too cheap to meter. The reality was that the shipping port reactor went online in 1957, producing electricity at a cost roughly 10 times that of coal-fired generation. Scientists at the AEC's own Brookhaven laboratory wrote a 1958 report describing accident scenarios in which 3,000 people would die immediately, with another 40,000 injured. Fear of possible atomic attack from the Soviet Union caused U.S. schoolchildren to participate in duck and cover civil defense drills. In the late 1950s, there was a stadium north of Las Vegas, Nevada, where tourists gathered to watch above-ground nuclear weapons tests taking place at the Nevada test site. 1960s. By exploiting the peaceful uses of the friendly atom in medical applications, earth removal, and, subsequently, in nuclear power plants, the nuclear industry and government sought to allay public fears about nuclear technology and promote the acceptance of nuclear weapons. At the peak of the atomic age, the United States government initiated Operation Plowshare, involving peaceful nuclear explosions. The United States Atomic Energy Commission chairman announced that the Plowshares project was intended to highlight the peaceful applications of nuclear explosive devices and thereby create a climate of world opinion that is more favorable to weapons development and tests. Project Plowshare was named directly from the Bible itself, specifically Micah chapter 4 verse 3, which states that God will beat swords into plowshares, and spears into pruning hooks, so that no country could lift up weapons weapons against another. Proposed uses included widening the Panama Canal, constructing a new sea-level waterway through Nicaragua nicknamed the Pan-Atomic Canal, cutting paths through mountainous areas for highways, and connecting inland river systems. Other proposals involved blasting underground caverns for water, natural gas, and petroleum storage. It was proposed to plant underground atomic bombs to extract shale oil in eastern Utah and western Colorado. Serious consideration was also given to using these explosives for various mining operations. One proposal suggested using nuclear blasts to connect underground aquifers in Arizona. Another plan involved surface blasting on the western slope of California's Sacramento Valley for a water transport project. However, there were many negative impacts from Project Plowshare's 27 nuclear explosions. Consequences included blighted land, relocated communities, tritium-contaminated water, radioactivity, and fallout from debris being hurled high into the atmosphere. These were ignored and downplayed until the program was terminated in 1977, due in large part to public opposition. After $770 million had been spent on the project. In the Thunderbirds TV series, a set of vehicles was presented that were imagined to be completely nuclear, as shown in cutaways presented in the comic books. The term atomic age was initially used in a positive, futuristic sense, but by the 1960s the threats posed by nuclear weapons had begun to edge out nuclear power as the dominant motif of the atom. 1970 to 2000. French advocates of nuclear power developed an aesthetic vision of nuclear technology as art to bolster support for the technology. Leclerc compares the nuclear cooling tower to some of the grandest architectural monuments of Western culture. The age in which we live has, for the public, been marked by the nuclear engineer and the gigantic edifices he has created. For builders and visitors alike, nuclear power plants will be considered the cathedrals of the 20th century. The syncretism mingles the conscious and the unconscious, religious fulfillment and industrial achievement. The limitations of uses of materials and boundless artistic inspiration, utopia come true in the continued search for harmony. In 1973, the United States Atomic Energy Commission predicted that, by the turn of the 21st century, 1,000 reactors would be producing electricity for homes and businesses across the USA. But after 1973, reactor orders declined sharply as electricity demand fell and construction costs rose. Many orders and partially completed plants were cancelled. Nuclear power has proved controversial since the 1970s. Highly radioactive materials may overheat and escape from the reactor building. Nuclear waste needs to be regularly removed from the reactors and disposed of safely for up to 1 million years, so that it does not pollute the environment. Recycling of nuclear waste has been discussed, but it creates plutonium which can be used in weapons, and in any case still leaves much unwanted waste to be stored and disposed of. Large purpose-built facilities for long-term disposal of nuclear waste have been difficult to site, and have not yet reached fruition. By the late 1970s, nuclear power suffered a remarkable international destabilization, as it was faced with economic difficulties and widespread public opposition, coming to a head with the 3 Mile Island accident in 1979, and the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, both of which adversely affected the nuclear power industry for decades thereafter. A cover story in the February 11, 1985, issue of Forbes magazine commented on the overall management of the nuclear power program in the United States. The failure of the U.S. nuclear power program ranks as the largest managerial disaster in business history, a disaster on the monumental scale only the blind, or the biased, can now think that the money has been well spent. It is a defeat for the U.S. consumer and for the competitiveness of U.S. industry, for the utilities that undertook the program and for the private enterprise system that made it possible. So, in a period just over 30 years, the early dramatic rise of nuclear power went into equally meteoric reverse. With no other energy technology has there been a conjunction of such rapid and revolutionary international emergence, followed so quickly by equally transformative demise. 21st century. In the 21st century, the label of the atomic age connotes either a sense of nostalgia or naivete, and is considered by many to have ended with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, though the term continues to be used by many historians to describe the era following the conclusion of the Second World War. Atomic energy and weapons continue to have a strong effect on world politics in the 21st century. The term is used by some science fiction fans to describe not only the era following the conclusion of the Second World War but also contemporary history up to the present day. The nuclear power industry has improved the safety and performance of reactors, and has proposed new safer reactor designs, but there is no guarantee that the reactors will be designed, built and operated correctly. Mistakes do occur, and the designers of reactors at Fukushima in Japan did not anticipate that a tsunami generated by an earthquake would disable the backup systems that were supposed to stabilize the reactor after the earthquake. According to UPSAG, the Fukushima nuclear accidents have cast doubt on whether even an advanced economy like Japan can master nuclear safety. Catastrophic scenarios involving terrorist attacks are also conceivable. An interdisciplinary team from MIT has estimated that if nuclear power use tripled from 2005 to 2055, at least 4 serious nuclear accidents would be expected in that period. In September 2012, Japan announced that it would completely phase out nuclear power by 2030. Although under the Abe administration this is now unlikely, with Germany and other countries in reaction to the accident at Fukushima. Germany plans to completely phase out nuclear energy by 2022. Chronology. A large anti-nuclear demonstration was held on May 6, 1979, in Washington, D.C., when 125,000 people, including the governor of California, attended a march and rally against nuclear power. In New York City on September 23, 1979, almost 200,000 people attended a protest against nuclear power. Anti-nuclear power protests preceded the shutdown of the Shoreham, Yankee Row, Millstone I, Rancho Seco, Maine Yankee, and about a dozen other nuclear power plants. On June 12, 1982, 1 million people demonstrated in New York City's Central Park against nuclear weapons and for an end to the Cold War arms race. It was the largest anti-nuclear protest and the largest political demonstration in American history. International Day of Nuclear Disarmament protests were held on June 20, 1983 at 50 sites across the United States. In 1986, hundreds of people walked from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. in the Great Peace March for global nuclear disarmament. There were many Nevada Desert Experience protests and peace camps at the Nevada test site during the 1980s and 1990s. On May 1, 2005, 40,000 anti-nuclear, anti-war protesters marched past the United Nations in New York. 60 years after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This was the largest anti-nuclear rally in the U.S. for several decades. Discovery and Development 1896. Henry Becquerel notices that uranium gives off an unknown radiation which fogs photographic film. 1898. Marie Curie discovers thorium gives off a similar radiation. She calls it radioactivity. 1903 Ernest Rutherford begins to speak of the possibility of atomic energy. 1905 Albert Einstein formulates the special theory of relativity, which explains the phenomenon of radioactivity as mass-energy equivalence. 1911 Ernest Rutherford formulates a theory about the structure of the atomic nucleus based on his experiments with alpha particles. 1930 Otto Hahn writes an article with his prophecy, "The Atom, the Source of Power of the Future," in the newspaper Deutsche Allgemeine Zeitung. 1932 James Chadwick discovers the neutron. 1934 Enrico Fermi begins bombarding uranium with slow neutrons. Ida Noddack predicts that uranium nuclei will break up under bombardment by fast neutrons. The 17th of December 1938 Otto Hahn and his assistant Fritz Strassmann, by bombarding uranium with fast neutrons, discover experimentally and prove nuclear fission with radiochemical methods. The 6th of January 1939 Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann published the first paper about the discovery in the German review Die Naturwissenschaften. The 10th of February 1939, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann published the second paper about the discovery in Die Naturwissenschaften, using for the first time the term uranium fission, and predict the liberation of additional neutrons in the fission process. The 11th of February 1939, Lise Meitner and her nephew Otto Frisch published the first theoretical interpretation of nuclear fission, a term coined by Frisch, in the British review Nature. The 11th of October 1939, the Einstein-Szilard letter, suggesting that the United States construct an atomic bomb, is delivered to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt signs the order to build an atomic bomb on 6 December 1941. The 26th of February 1941, discovery of plutonium by Glenn Seaborg and Arthur Weil. September 1942, General Leslie Groves takes charge of the Manhattan Project. The 2nd of December 1942, under the leadership of Fermi, the first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction takes place in Chicago, United States, at the Chicago Pile 1. Nuclear arms deployment. The 16th of July 1945, the first atomic bomb is tested near Alamogordo, New Mexico, United States, in the successful Trinity TED. The 6th of August 1945, the first atomic bomb is deployed as a military weapon in warfare in the bombing of Hiroshima, Empire of Japan. The 9th of August 1945, the second atomic bomb is deployed as a military weapon in warfare in the bombing of Nagasaki, Empire of Japan. The 5th of September 1951, the U.S. Air Force announces the awarding of a contract for the development of an atomic-powered airplane. The 1st of November 1952, the first hydrogen bomb, largely designed by Edward Teller, is tested at Eniwetok Atoll. Atoms for Peace. The 8th of December 1953, U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, in a speech before the UN General Assembly, announces the Atoms for Peace program to provide nuclear power to developing countries. The 21st of January 1954, the first nuclear submarine, the US Nautilus, is launched into the Thames River near New London, Connecticut, United States. The 27th of June 1954, the first nuclear power plant begins operation near Obninsk, USSR. The 17th of September 1954, Lewis L. Strauss, chairman of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, states that nuclear energy will be too cheap to meter. The 29th of September 1957, 200+ people die as a result of the Malyuk nuclear waste storage tank explosion in Chelyabinsk, Soviet Union. 270,000 people were exposed to dangerous radiation levels. 1957 to 1959, the Soviet Union and the United States both begin deployment of ICBMs. 1958, the neutron bomb, a special type of tactical nuclear weapon developed specifically to release a relatively large portion of its energy as energetic neutron radiation, is invented by Samuel Cohen of the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. 1960, Herman Kahn publishes the book on thermonuclear war. November 1961, in Fortune magazine, an article by Gilbert Burke appears outlining the plans of Nelson Rockefeller, Edward Teller, Herman Kahn, and Chet Holyfield for the construction of an enormous network of concrete-lined underground fallout shelters throughout the United States, sufficient to shelter millions of people to serve as a refuge in case of nuclear war. The 12th of October 1962 to the 28th of October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis brings Earth to the brink of nuclear war. The 10th of October 1963, the Partial Test Ban Treaty goes into effect, banning above-ground nuclear testing. The 26th of August 1966, the first pebble-bed reactor goes online in Jülich, West Germany. The 27th of January 1967, the Outer Space Treaty bans the deployment of nuclear weapons in space. 1968, physicist Freeman J. Dyson proposes building a space ark using an Orion nuclear pulse propulsion rocket powered by hydrogen bombs. The rocket would have a payload of 50,000 tons, a crew of 240, and be able to travel at 3.3% of the speed of light and would reach Alpha Centauri in 133 years. It would cost $367 billion in $1,968, which is the equivalent of about $2.2 trillion in 2012. 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. The 6th of May 1979, a large anti-nuclear demonstration was held in Washington, D.C., when 125,000 people, including the governor of California, attended a march and rally against nuclear power. The 28th of March 1979, the 3 Mile Island accident occurs at the 3 Mile Island nuclear generating station near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, dampening enthusiasm in the United States for nuclear power, and causing a dramatic shift in the growth of nuclear power in the United States. The 23rd of September 1979, in New York City, almost 200,000 people attended a protest against nuclear power. The 26th of April 1986, the Chernobyl disaster occurs at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near Pripyat, Ukraine, USSR, reducing enthusiasm for nuclear power among many people in the world, and causing a dramatic shift in the growth of nuclear power. Nuclear arms reduction. The 8th of December 1987, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty is signed in Washington. 1987. Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev agreed after negotiations following the October 11–12, 1986 Reykjavik summit to go farther than a nuclear freeze. They agreed to reduce nuclear arsenals. IRBMs and SRBMs were eliminated. 1990 present. Nuclear power is the primary source of electricity in France. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, France produces over 3/4 of its power from nuclear sources, the highest percentage in the world during these 2 decades. The 31st of July 1991, as the Cold War ends, the START Treaty is signed by the United States and the Soviet Union, reducing the deployed nuclear warheads of each side to no more than 6,000 each. 1993, the megatons to megawatts program is agreed upon by Russia and the United States and begins to be implemented in 1995. when it is completed. In 2013, 500 tons of uranium derived from 20,000 nuclear warheads from Russia will have been converted from weapons-grade to reactor-grade uranium and used in United States nuclear plants to generate electricity. This has provided 10% of the electrical power of the U.S. during the 1995 to 2013 period. 2006 Patrick Moore, a founder of Greenpeace and other environmentalists such as Stuart Brand, suggests the deployment of more advanced nuclear power technology for electric power generation to combat global warming. The 21st of November 2006 implementation of the ITER fusion power reactor project near Cadarache, France is begun. Construction is to be completed in 2016 with the hope that the research conducted there will allow the introduction of practical commercial fusion power plants by 2050. 2006 to 2009 a number of nuclear engineers begin to suggest that, to combat global warming, it would be more efficient to build nuclear reactors that operate on the thorium cycle. The 8th of April 2010 the New START Treaty is signed by the United States and Russia in Prague. It mandates the eventual reduction by both sides to no more than 1,550 deployed strategic nuclear weapons each. Fukushima, the 11th of March 2011, a tsunami resulting from the Tohoku earthquake causes severe damage to the Fukushima iron nuclear power plant in Japan, causing partial nuclear meltdowns in several of the reactors. Many international leaders express concerns about the accidents, and some countries re-evaluate existing nuclear energy programs. On the 11th of April 2011, this event was rated level 7 on the International Nuclear Event Scale by the Japanese government's Nuclear Safety Agency. Other than the Chernobyl disaster, it is the only nuclear accident to be rated level 7, the highest level on the scale, and caused the most dramatic shift in nuclear policy to date.